for you.
Oh, if I were
So you
any
could
better,
do-
it would be illegal.
So, do you think that you'll be able to?
Yeah, I think I moved things around, so I will.
Okay.
Oh, you're beating down here. Oh, and the box disappeared. I'll take that and I'll also use it now.
Thank you very much for blowing up
Yeah, so we can see it.
people's.
Yeah, the box is usually
It
right there.
disappeared. Yeah, I'll take it. Thank you. Hi there. I warmed it up for you all.
The
I
TD
opened the
Bank.
door. I opened the door, so I don't know what I went there.
TD Bank, I didn't have a problem reading, but I mean, even with a magnifying glass, I couldn't, that's ridiculous. And how a bank could come into a meeting with investors and use this.
I think
I
what
mean-
they'll do is they'll bring their own copies, that's what they send over the email. And so they'll probably bring updated copies, but I wanted you to get an idea of how they're set up and the approximate amount that we have. So I'm gonna go get my telephone and.
So did you blow them both up, TD and?
I blew everything up.
Okay.
And I gave you all a copy of the Portland Trust Company, so you've got the information on the, Pittsfield Future Fund.
Okay.
When,
About 9 o'clock this morning is when she started.
uh,
I had all these things planned for today, and they all got scratched off the list.
What? Oh, little bitties. Teeny. Are they piggies?
Yeah,
I just noticed the ears. I just noticed the ears.
yeah. Yeah, their ears are all back.
to me, that's bacon and training.
They are cute. I've never seen a spotted pig before.
Really?
Yeah.
Our boar is an old spot, and so he's supposed to look like that. He's like he's purebred, but he's all white and he has like 3 spots on him. But he's throwing spotted piglets, and the mama is a cross between a Duroc, which is a red pig, and a old spot, I think. So she usually
They're so
has
cute.
piglet.
They
That's my
make-
favorite. The spotted one's my favorite one.
Aw.
It is very
They
cute.
make great house pets.
These don't.
These don't?
No, because they're like 500 pounds.
Oh, yeah. No, the
Which
small
way?
ones do.
The
small
teacup
ones.
piglets and the Vietnamese potbelly pigs, and there's another.
They say
breed
those
that's a
potbelly
small
pigs
one.
are really, really smart.
They are. You can potty train them. And is this Mike Chinchette with no hair?
Could be.
I had not noticed that picture before. Yeah. Huh.
Well, if I had known she was going to duplicate everything again, I wouldn't have brought my
2008.
stuff.
There will also
Um,
there will always
just-
be complications.
Just so you know, I had an appointment at MMA. I met with an attorney. So Tuesday I'll be giving the council copies, not to discuss, just to peruse for the moment until we can.
Okay.
Michael said he would come down and turn on the box.
He was out there in the hall.
Oh, maybe he's already turned it on. Excellent. He was very quick. Is this right there? I'm looking quick for it.
So who is first?
Okay.
Peoples or TD?
Yeah, Peoples will be first. So this is the Finance Committee meeting. Finance Committee meeting for Tuesday, April 21st, starting at 3 p.m. And we have 2 appointments with the investment companies, and then we can discuss the other investments. So we have, as a council committee, we have, why don't we introduce ourselves? Introduce ourselves. if you
Heather
like.
Donahue, Deputy Mayor, Counselor from District 4.
Howard Margolski, Counselor at Large. from all districts.
Deborah Billings, Counselor at Large.
And Catherine Ruth, Town Manager. And I'm going to be calling Robert Stackhouse, our counselor that's also on the committee, see if we can get through to his number that he's using. I'll wait for just a couple of minutes. So we got 2 appointments that are scheduled. The first one's at 3:15, and the individuals that indicated that they would be coming are Senior Vice President Donna and a Senior Wealth Management Assistant, Ellen. And then at 4 o'clock we have Ed Donahue, who's the Vice President and the Senior Investment Advisor for TD Wealth. The People's United Wealth is most of our reserve accounts, and a couple of trusts are in there. Small amounts, which I would like one time to transfer them over to TD Wealth, because the trust monies can be invested in other items, more investment types. You can have a higher interest rate,
Right.
but they're small balances. And the meeting with TD Wealth will talk about the cemetery investments, which have started out, they were wavering around 200,000, and now they have never gotten up over $1 million, but they're getting up there high again. So they are.
So TD has a cemetery fund now, because originally
Yes.
didn't Bangor Savings have it?
All kinds of banks, all kinds of entities.
When I was on the council, when we first did this, it was
It was
Bangor Savings.
everywhere. Yep, that's correct. So we incorporated all of them so that we could be in sectors, so that we weren't overweighted in an
Right.
area, so it would go really high and then really low, and it was, not steady growth. So we put them in all the sectors that the investment companies indicated should be, and it's grown extensively. And so just very quickly, in preparation of the meeting, we'll have People's United, which is the spreadsheet that says People's United Wealth. We have a total of $1,663,857.32, broken up into over 20 reserve accounts, and there's a few trusts in there.
That's the number you just read.
Can you,
$1,663,000.
That's the People's United.
And look for this page.
Yeah, look for page
okay,
6 of 6. Yeah, I wrote it on my top part. So I could see it.
Ending market value.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we would use the ending market value, which is the same as the book value, $1,663,857.32. And from now on, I'll put that on the top of the document like I did mine.
Yeah.
Because it's very easy to find. And all the investments.
Come on in.
Okay. I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah, come right in. We're just talking about where you're at.
Okay, great.
I'm Catherine.
Hi, Catherine. I'm Donna. Nice to see you.
Nice
to see you. This is Ellen.
Yeah, I remember Ellen. Thank you.
John is our chief investment officer. He had availability, so we thought it'd be great for him to join us.
Well, absolutely wonderful.
Any market.
Yep, so why don't you introduce yourself to all the counselors?
Great.
Starting over here. Then we've got a seat for you in the middle.
Fabulous.
perfect, thank you.
Donna Temple.
Heather Donahue.
Nice to meet you, Heather.
Howard Ruggles.
Hi, Heather. Nice to meet you. She brought some
Howard
trees.
Ruggles.
Celebration of your celebration.
Howard Ruggles.
Brought some little gifts.
Oh, look at
Knowing you're celebrating the 200th
Thank you.
anniversary. Donna Temple.
Deborah Billings.
Nice to meet you,
you.
Deborah.
John Frost.
Nice to meet you.
There'll be others
Ellen.
joining.
Nice to meet you too.
Oh, well, thank you so much.
I'll leave these with you, I guess, as
Oh,
three others.
wonderful. Oh, wonderful. And the counselors will like those. Thank you so much. Yeah, have a seat right there.
Are you calling Bob?
I'm trying to.
Okay. I thought it was mine now for a minute.
Yes, thank you. 115, please, Mr. Stackhouse. Thank you so much. So we're calling one of the counselors who's out right now on a leave. Let's see if we can hook him in here. He loves the invest. Yep, that would be fine. It's Catherine.
Okay.
And he'll be calling 416-787-8255. 7741
Okay,
for a meeting.
all right, thank you.
Excellent, thank you so much. All right, very good. Well, thank you so much for coming in. I'm sure you have a presentation for us. I gave the counselors who are, we're resurrecting the Finance Committee meetings. We had some different items going on. People were ill, and there was a lot of work going on, and changes and everything. So we sort of suspended them for a few months. And so now we have been meeting with TD cemeteries quite a bit. And once in a while we'd meet with people. So we thought we would get everybody on the same schedule.
Great.
And maybe meet a couple of times a year. So this is the first meeting to reintroduce everyone to the financial investment. So you can make any presentation you'd like.
Okay.
Well, just I guess to familiarize everybody that this is actually the team at People's United in the Wealth Management Department. So I'm a wealth management officer, and it's my job to oversee generally the relationship with the bank. Ellen works on your account as well and helps a lot with the day-to-day stuff. She sends the monthly spreadsheets to Catherine, and we really mostly work as a team to make sure that we're meeting your needs and expectations. John is our Chief Investment Officer and oversees the investment aspect of the wealth management group, and hasn't worked with this account historically, but had availability, and we thought it was better to bring him than not. So.
Great. I thought we'd start with a brief market outlook, and we have a couple of handouts here.
Thank you so much.
This information is as of March 31st. If you go to the first page, it's a brief review of what we saw in the first quarter. January was a very strong start to the year for U.S. equities, and the stocks returned over 13% in the first quarter. International stocks also performed well, and bond returns were fairly robust for bonds in the quarter. Economically, the U.S. economy grew 2.9% for the calendar year, just shy of the 3% that was targeted by our president. What else can we say on the right-hand side? Inflation continues to be fairly low, hovering around or just below that 2% level. And the trade negotiations between U.S. and China have been a headline focus. Looking at the bottom right-hand side of that page are the returns for different areas of the market. U.S. stocks returned between 13 and 15%. Bond indexes down around 2 to 3%, while the international equity benchmarks at the very bottom returned between 9 and 10%. The next page is our outlook going forward. We believe, and highlighted there in red, there are 2 points. We believe the economy will slow from the strong pace we saw last year of 2.9%, but will remain in growth mode for the next couple of years. In addition, we believe the volatility that we've seen on the equity side of the market will continue. Corporate earnings have been coming in. We expect the first half of 2019 to be weaker than the second half. It is expected that earnings for the first quarter will actually be negative. Earnings were very strong last year, but boosted by the changes in our tax code. Companies did get a lot of relief from that, which boosted their earnings. That that one-time boost has gone away. So now when they're comparing growth last year to growth this year, it's a tough comparison because of that boost from taxes. On the right-hand side, you can see different segments. On the consumer side that continue to have low unemployment. Energy prices continue to be low. Federal Reserve is on pause right now, or they say they are, which has been a shift. In the fourth quarter, they were talking about increasing short-term interest rates at least a couple times. In January, that changed, and they decided, or they announced that they are on pause, and they don't know if the next change would be an increase in rates or a decrease in rates. So they are waiting. That decision is contingent on the data that comes in. Additional factors to watch are Chinese trade negotiations, wage increases in productivity, and of course the yield curve. The bottom of the page are the economic metrics. Here we compare annual numbers for 2016, 17, 18 and projected numbers for 2019. You can see GDP is expected to fall from the 2.9%. We think it'll be in the 2 to 2.5% range, probably around 2.3. Inflation most currently came in at 1.9%. We expect that to perhaps increase slightly to just over 2%. We do not anticipate inflation will be a near-term problem. Fed funds rate we have staying right at the current level of 2.25% to 2.5%. 10-year Treasury staying roughly where it is right now. Currently we're about 2.56. We think it will stay in the 2.3 to 3% range, probably not go over that 3. Unemployment continues to be low, I think deceivingly low. We do have our challenges on the employment side. We have people that are underemployed, they're working but not in jobs that they could be earning more in better jobs, in jobs that fit them better. There's also a challenge with training workers for the jobs that are out there today, and something as a country we need to do. Even a lot of lower paying jobs now require unique skills that you need a lot of training for. On the next page is our strategy and our tactical strategy. We continue to believe that equities will do better than bonds over the next 12 months or so. So we are overweight equities. We are neutral to underweight on fixed income and alternatives. I know a lot of this really doesn't, a lot of these comments don't apply to your account, that's fixed income, very short term, but I thought the general economic outlook might be helpful for you. Any thoughts or discussion or comments?
Pretty
Does it make sense? Does it make
Pretty
sense?
self-explanatory, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
It does, and we'll see if we are told the same thing later on.
Okay, now we do have some information on specific to the account. The very first part of it is our investment outlook. This is a page we publish, or a piece we publish quarterly. I'm not going to go through that. Same type of thinking here that I just went through. So in section 1, we have what we call the relationship summary. Kind of outlines the parameters of the account.
So the relationship summary is really our guide to make sure that we're on the same page about what your needs are and that we're meeting those needs. We consider this document dynamic, so if there's anything that I outline in here that you think is inaccurate or should be fine-tuned or edited or changed, certainly let us know.
It's really a communication piece just to make sure we're on the same page.
So generally speaking, even though the investments in the specific account are relatively short term, the time horizon is really long, and you're, investing these monies on behalf of, for at least, you're not going to go financially broke, right? So you're going to be around for a long time. Communication plan.
That's our hope, anyway.
Yes, right.
Goal.
Question. What's you talk about short-term, long-term. What's your cutoff? What do you consider short-term versus longer term?
As far as investments,
Yeah.
or as far as the outlook for the account?
Well, for investments per se.
Like with fixed income, if we're talking short-term fixed income, I'd say 2 or 3 years or less.
Okay.
So anything that matures within 3 years, 2 to 3 years.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
So the communication plan currently is to have meetings periodically with you all, and Catherine, you just mentioned the goal would be to do this a couple of times a year.
Make a regular schedule. yes.
Yeah, so I'll add that in. We do send statements and sub-accounting monthly. We do also provide a safety and soundness reporting annually in February for the audit purposes. I do send out periodically emails of economic information, so when we have updates such as what John has presented, I can send that by email. I'm happy to take emails if you'd like me to do that on a more regular basis for you. Sometimes, even though, as John suggests, the equity piece might not be relevant to this specific account, it is helpful just generally for you to know what's going on in the economy. So. Bullet point 5 is really just a reminder that we are here for you. So if there's anything more or different in the day-to-day that you see as it arises, please let us know. We want to be responsive and make sure you're getting what you need. So always be reminded. Right now, liquidity needs. There are no regular set distributions. There have been none year to date. This is a municipal relationship. Statements are sent monthly to Catherine. It outlines here the town consists of 7 members and 4 counselors. I'm not sure that's necessarily relevant to the account specifically, but good knowledge for me to be reminded of how things are going.
It's 7 counselors.
7 members, 4 counselors, and 3 at large. So it's 7 counselors.
We're all counselors.
Oh.
3
Seven
are
altogether.
large and 4 represent a specific district.
Oh.
Okay, great.
So do you anticipate money coming out of this account in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, that's why we've kept some cash in there. We have a major project that should be coming up with the standpipes for painting for the water department.
Huh?
And so that would be a major project.
When is that expected to begin?
Should begin shortly with the process.
With the weather improves?
Yes, definitely, yes. We need our RFP, which the supervisor is working on. But it's very important to do that. We've been saving money for years. We send in $4,500 from the 2 capital accounts in the Water Enterprise Fund for that standpipe painting. It was an interesting project when we had to clean out the inside and paint. They actually was done by divers going in after we took all the water out. So interesting things go on with water. It's not sewer too.
Sounds like it.
So do you have an idea how much that'll be and the timing of it? The money?
It's around the amount of the cash that we have in the account.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
So that was one of the questions you had, and we're trying to nail that down.
What was your answer, Catherine?
Pardon?
I didn't hear your answer.
Oh, the
how much?
standpipe project would be around the amount of cash that's in the account, which is approximately $208,000.
Okay.
But if the schedule's going to drag out, we'll talk about whether we should invest things for a couple of months or 3 months or something.
Okay.
Yeah, we did just do well, we'll get to it anyways, the recent treasury purchase.
I'm a little confused. Catherine, you said there's $208,000 in cash in the account. What would the balance be in? Is it?
All right, so,
I
on
mean, it
the-
says it's 301,000.
yes, but the account has different investments in it. So we do keep some cash in the account, which is at the end. I think it's around
So just to
200.
clarify for me, because I'm new in this world,
Yeah, me too.
the account
Well,
per
also
se
I
is
suggest-
just a nominal name for money to a particular project. This is not a particular account in the bank that some of this money could be in CDs or some of it could be invested in and some of it's in cash. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, most of it's in the treasury bonds. It's in the items that legally we can invest in. Whereas when we meet with TD Wealth on the cemetery, you can invest in all kinds of things under the law.
So where does it tell us in here, like, what kind of money is in the account?
Let's go
That's what we're
through-
gonna get to
let's go
next.
through
Yeah, and
the-
I'll also
I-
point out, I think that your
confused.
spreadsheets are
It's-
set up as of March 31st.
Yes, yes.
Our reporting is gonna be as of last Friday.
Okay,
So we're
that's
gonna
fine.
have 2 more weeks of stuff that has happened that you're not gonna see
Okay.
on that, one of which is a trade. But we
Okay.
can,
So there was something done in the meantime.
It
between
sounds
this
like it,
and that.
yes. Things
Yeah.
always happen.
And the other question that I had was, and this is kind of like a general question, the sewer sludge removal account.
Yeah.
Didn't we already have that done?
We did, but we're required by the USDA, in which we have our long-term huge loan for that project. We had a $1.8 million loan with a large grant totaling $3.4 million. So one of the requirements of the loan is that we put away $85,000 each year toward the future project of cleaning it out. And so after we get a few years down the road, we can actually cash out the USDA loan and get another loan to pay that off, and then perhaps stop this $85,000 being raised each year in the sewer budget, because we have plenty of money to clean things out.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, there's
We're all set.
$700,000, we can
I
clean
know.
out a lot of sludge.
They're all set.
It was less expensive. We had less than they thought, right?
Yes, we did.
So this is,
It's a requirement that is a requirement of that loan.
Where are you looking? Heather?
I'm
What page?
on page 5 of
Okay.
6. It just caught I was just looking at account totals and it kind of caught my eye.
Yeah,
And I'm
that's a
like,
large one.
why do we have so much money for the sewer sludge if we just did it?
That's why we do. It's a requirement of the USDA in order to get the massive grant that we got in the loan at the low interest rate. So we were able, as a side note, in an update for Deborah, who's come back to the council, we were so fortunate to be able to not only take care of the sludge in the largest lagoon system in the state of Maine that's available throughout the towns. There's a lot of lagoon systems, but you don't usually hear about them. But ours is the largest. It was thought that it was a massive clean out because it had never been cleaned out. And then, as projected by 2 engineers, and then when it was actually cleaned out, it was a very small cost. So we were allowed to use all the other money during a downtime in which contractors were cutting all their rates to do a massive number of projects. We did approximately 13 sections of roads for rehabbing the sewer, which was like a miracle. So we were very, very fortunate.
Good.
The USDA at that time said that we had the best results from the most use of the monies that they had loaned out. Now that may have changed since then because it was a few years ago, but we were very fortunate. So that's the history of sludge.
great. All right, well, I'll go quickly through the rest of this and we can get to the actual investments. Current fee structure is a flat 25 basis points or 0.25%. Right now, when we're doing investments on this account, we check in with Catherine on cash needs, recognizing that there's usually a lot of things going on in projects and whatnot. And so once we have a clear understanding of that, then we make a decision about investing of cash, whether it should be 6 months or a year or 18 months, that sort of thing, just to get a sense of it all. We don't operate under an investment policy currently. We don't need to. I've just noted it here. Sometimes it's helpful if people have one in place. We certainly could work with you to develop one if you thought you would want one. But I think we have a good sort of system and rhythm down currently. Any comments?
Some towns or some accounts similar to this would have an investment policy statement, but not all. So.
Don't we kind of have that in
We
our
have one for the
code?
cemetery, just because that was such a massive change. For this investment, we had put out an RFP and then consolidated the reserves from a number of banks, and People's United had the best proposal at that time, and it's worked out well all these years. So the investment strategy that we set up was one we needed for the cemetery funds, because we had money everywhere. It was all over the place. One of the first projects the council said when I was hired back then was to consolidate, find all this basically. And so it was invested through many brokerage houses. It was quite an interesting process. So we consolidated everything, and its value was a little bit over 200,000, and now it's grown so much from the really good investments.
It all
And in
came out
that,
of the
I'm sure
it all started because of the cemetery fund.
Correct.
That's the first thing that we did.
Yep.
Right, I'm sure you have a lot more flexibility there.
Correct. A
So
lot of flexibility.
an investment policy statement is
Yes.
more important given the
Correct. Yes,
the
definitely.
flexibility.
Yep, that's why we did it.
Right.
We wish we had that much flexibility with the reserves, but we don't. So
Right.
we have a strict list of items in the state statutes that we can invest in.
So it's just not needed.
So it's not needed, correct, exactly, use the state law.
Okay. The investment objective for the portfolio is what we would call fixed income. 85 to 100% of the portfolio in fixed income securities, and really the remainder in cash, and that cash amount is really dictated by your needs.
Questions so far?
In the section 2 is a little more information on the portfolio. This is as of April, as you see on the cover page, as of April 12. At the top of page 2, you'll see the fixed income value, the cash value currently at $92,000, and the total portfolio value of $1,673,000. The just roughly gives you year-to-date numbers. Beginning value year-to-date in the middle of the page, $1,647,000, and the account return at the bottom of that column. Year-to-date, it's returned 1.14%.
So the, where it says investment gain, that's interest to the account?
Investment gain would be appreciation, investment return from the portfolio.
And that is
So
what
in this
this
case,
year for earnings?
it would be primarily interest from treasury bills or CDs.
Okay.
On the next page is the return on the portfolio over different time periods. The 1-year return, the total return is in black, down towards the bottom of the writing. So
The lighter gray shaded.
year to date, the account has returned 1.14%. Over the last 12 months, it has returned 2.6%.
Where are you reading?
The dark black,
The second page, yep,
Page-
nope, one more page up. There you
Page
go.
3, you're on page 3.
Yeah.
page 3. In the heavy black print, towards the middle,
Mm-hmm.
you'll see year-to-date gross return of 1.14%. So that means year-to-date, through the first quarter, the account returned 1.1%. Over the last 12 months, it's returned 2.6%, and over 5 years, 1.2%. We need to keep in mind what type of environment we've come from. Interest rates were virtually zero. For the short-term, interest rates were virtually zero. The Fed has increased the Fed funds rate, which is short-term in nature. Now it is between 2.25% and 2.5%. The benchmarks I put at the bottom of this page are a 6-month Treasury bill, as well as an index that is U.S. Treasury 1 to 3 year. Both very short-term indexes, but give some context to the return that the total return that you're receiving in this account. So over the 1-year period, that 2.66% compares to 2.27 of a 6-month T-bill and 2.68 of a 1 to 3 year Treasury. And that's where you should expect to be given the constraints of this portfolio. I know it's not exciting numbers, not like equity where you return 13% in the first quarter, but because of the safety that you need with this money, or that dictates what the state says, that's the return you're going to get. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Okay.
And by keeping it relatively short, you are able to reinvest. So if the Fed does decide they want to make a move this year, you're able to capture that upon maturity and really take advantage of that. So
And that's what's good, because
the laddering is
yes,
important.
Definitely.
If we
I
go to
was going to
page-
ask that question. Laddering in bonds?
There's
Not
these
CDs
are
instead of CDs?
primarily these are CDs, and they're
Okay.
brokered CDs, so they are FDIC insured up to $250,000. Also in here are government securities, primarily treasuries, and they're backed by the full faith of the U.S. government. If you look on page 4, is a listing of the securities in the portfolio with the current market value. Of course, the price does change on them, and that is reflected in the performance. The most recent purchase was at the very bottom, $300,000 U.S. Treasury bill, matures October of this year. Everything in here is liquid, especially Treasury bills. Treasury bills are very liquid. Could be sold at any time, so I wouldn't be too concerned if there is a cash need. Cash can easily be raised without any problem. But we do typically look out 6 months or so, 6 to 12 months, look at cash needs of the organization, what you plan on taking from the account, and plan on either the cash, the money market vehicle being used for that, or a maturity being used for that.
it allows you to maximize
If
and
you
still have the liquidity without obligations.
And if you knew of an obligation you had, say, 2 years from now, we could invest in something to mature just before you need to make that payment. So we can do some kind of managing the cash flow if that would be appropriate. We do that in some situations. On the next page, page 5, gives you an idea of the maturities by year. There are maturities 2019, 2020, 21, and 22.
You'll note the newest purchase that matures in October didn't carry down to this report.
So the 300,000 that was recently purchased needs to be added to that 2019
That one.
bar. So instead of being at, let's see, 205,000, it should be 505,000. So we really have the most maturing in 2019 and 2020. Very conservative portfolio, really getting appropriate returns for how it needs to be invested.
Was that 300,000 that you put in the T-bill from another
It was from a maturity.
maturity that you
Right.
just
And
reinvested?
typically we roll them over.
Roll them over, okay.
Typically check to see if any cash needs or
Check the
you
timeline.
need the money for something
Okay.
first.
And do we know, was that originally invested as part of the PERS money? Or was that?
It was from a maturity.
Okay.
Right.
And do we know, was that originally invested as part of the PERS money?
It was from a maturity.
Okay.
Right.
Was that part of
No,
the
it's
portion
totally
that was set
separate,
aside?
yeah.
That's
These are
different,
different.
something already in there.
Yeah,
Okay.
these are reserves we've had for decades,
Okay.
and a few new ones in there. Sludge.
I was gonna say, so it's sludge one. We don't have a slush fund, we have a sludge fund.
What I've, in accounts like this, what we frequently do is identify a cash target. Maybe it's 50,000, maybe it's 100,000, maybe it's 200,000, whatever, and maintain that in money market vehicle.
Sort of your
And
minimum.
then the rest, as maturities are realized, we would automatically roll that over. We could do that here. I know that's not how it's been working up to this point.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I guess it depends really how much involvement you feel you need or want. We have the ability to accommodate whatever works best from processing standpoint.
So that is the material we prepared. Any thoughts, questions, concerns? Anything additional we can do for you?
It's been working really well. In order to generate more interest, we would leave less cash in the money markets.
That would generate a little bit more. Typically, to get more interest, you either need to extend maturities. So instead of going 1 year or 2 years, you go 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. That would raise the yield on the portfolio, and you can do that with high quality securities. The other way is to invest in lesser quality securities. And I don't think you are allowed to do either of those. So you're really, it is what it is, and you're making the most of what you can do.
And the monies are totally, everything is totally secure.
Yeah, I think you're doing a good job to try to recognize that if you can have at least, a 4 to 6 month stretch where you're not going to need monies for a project, that you could invest that and sort of bump up your yield as much as possible. So we do have the ability to do that with the treasuries, and like John said, they can be liquidated at any time. So if a worst case scenario came and you needed money unexpectedly, we could get it for you and you wouldn't really lose anything.
And we could have an understanding, and frequently they're made with an investment policy statement, so it's in writing, that maybe investments would be purchased so that they mature every 6 months. So money would be rolling every 6 months, something like that, and you'd have a target of, say, $100,000 in cash for incidental needs, and then every 6 months you'd be rolling maturities.
So we're working on a new capital improvement plan. So once we have that more streamlined, we should be able to do this. But it'll be a little while.
Does that impact this account, capital improvement?
Yes, because these are capital projects in here.
Gotcha.
The reserve accounts.
Understood.
Yeah, there's a number of them.
Okay. So there's decisions to be
You're
made.
talking about the,
Yeah, but it sounds like the
Sewer
goal
and
would be to
roads
get
and
into that.
Yes, there's a
Right.
few other items too.
Where there's just a 6 month churning of availability without
Yeah,
needing
we're
to.
changing over how we do our capital improvement plan. So once we get that all finalized, we should be able to, do just that.
That'd be great.
Yeah. We used to do that, way back before you all.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. All right, so everything, I guess, the sub-accounting seems to be working out.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
we communicate regularly when.
Yes, and I did want to thank you all, especially Ellen, because everything's been so easy to follow, with the exception of that penny that shows up once in a while. I have to figure out where to put it. No, very, very helpful.
Is anybody interested in getting the periodic economic information? I can just have you jot your email down if you want to. Happy to
More
distribute it.
emails.
I should give you the new email that I have. I don't know what it is yet. I don't have the envelope yet.
So,
And thank you for the extra books. We got a couple of people interested.
Great.
One is a counselor that probably had another meeting. Somebody came in, he had to meet with him. So he's interested in items, so I'll get him the book. And then we have a citizen that's interested.
And if you ever have questions or want to discuss an issue, just feel free to give us a call.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your day to come.
Yes, that was very, very easy to follow. I'm not gonna make him walk across the room.
Yes, well, thank you.
Poor guy. Yes, I am.
Yeah, we like this format and setting. Usually we would meet at night, and so we're trying to move our meetings up a little bit,
Ah,
if it works for the counselors.
great.
And I know it works better for you all.
It does work for us a little better. Yes, thank you.
So we'll figure out if we want to meet quarterly or biannually. I think probably twice a year. would be
And if
good.
you wanted to sit down with us outside of the group and talk about investment policy or talk about just some guidelines on this account, just let us know.
Thank you
We
very
welcome
much.
that discussion.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you all so much.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Catherine, after the presentation, are we going to talk about the individual, like go through the individual accounts here at all, or?
If we want to.
I just had some questions about.
More sewer questions.
We always get into that. I don't know.
Actually, no, I'm onto flowers.
Oh,
The
okay.
flower account.
I don't think there's quite as much money in the flower account.
No, the sewer
Yes,
went
yes,
today
that
on
one went way down.
Oh,
Rain.
sewer went today on that one.
Yeah.
I know, we wish there was more in there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Yep, so nice to see
So
you.
nice to meet you.
Sorry, a little slow, I broke my leg. I'm all
Nice
set,
meeting
I'm
you.
on the rebound. Thank you, so nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you so much, all.
Okay, so it's been 15 years, so remind me why this account with People's, we can only invest in a certain particular way.
Yeah, I can make a copy of the state law for you. We're only allowed to invest in certain items. The items are what they've got indicated, it's
Treasury bills and things like that.
all of those. It's because the monies are reserve funds, so that we cannot lose the money if we got into, some of these higher risk things, which we have for the cemetery trust, which we are allowed to do under the law, then we would get in trouble and be legally liable for the
Right.
funds. You have to keep the principals. The interest can move around and hopefully it gets larger. There's a couple of accounts here that we would, love to build up, but, once the principal's gone, then, once the interest is gone, then you can't use the principal, so.
Right.
The flower account was one of those.
So is the basis for each of these accounts, from your perspective or from the town's perspective, is that the state law has you set up these accounts with a certain amount of cash in them, a certain amount of theoretical money.
Which has been based upon the monies that the town has had available through the budget process.
Historically.
Historically, correct. So if we look back in one year, we might have been able to, we thought we were going to work on a certain project, so you start beefing up the account. In the last few years, we've tried to beef up different items. So based upon how much monies are available through the budgeting process, which was for many years $105,000,
Yeah.
and then we tried to increase it this time and then had to decrease it a bit. So those monies then at the end of the year, if something doesn't come up that's a requirement, or like we were going to just buy something that year, the monies get transferred to the reserve account by the original budget, and so the monies go in there into the principal, and then it builds it up.
So these reserves come from our budget surplus, or just as part of the budget process?
It's part of the budget.
Okay.
And
Now,
what we can afford.
okay. Now, I noticed that you have, for example, 2 cemetery funds in here.
Yes.
But yet, we're going to talk with TD about the cemetery fund, correct?
Yes, as a
What's the
var-
difference?
Yeah, these were in here when I arrived, and I was told I could not take them out and move them to into another type of account. So I had not found out why. So I've just left them here. They have to be secure. There may be some source documents that we've been unable to find. The cemetery accounts were, I won't say in disarray, but the paperwork was everywhere.
Yeah.
So I just left them here.
So, like,
But the bulk of the money is
Oh, yeah.
in the trust.
major
yeah,
amount is in
but
the-
do we ever touch this money from the point of view of the cemetery, for example?
We actually, because the interest rates are less, we'll use these monies rather than use the ones that are in the TD cemetery trust, because that has a higher yield. Now, that may change this year because we had decided to fund the cemetery budget through the budget process, in order to have a revenue source. So you could take a little bit out of here, but not a lot. So we would likely have to touch the TD cemetery reserve trust this time.
Well, there's,
So, of the two, there's a cemetery is that improvement?
Capital
And then there's
improvement.
cemetery per care.
Yeah, the cemetery capital improvement, I was told years ago, was set up to do enhancements to the cemeteries, and we have utilized monies from the account to help build the roads. Before I arrived, or as I was arriving, you had purchased a piece of land, so that was paid out of there. The cemetery perpetual care is a requirement of the state law that if we're going to use perpetual care, then there'll be set fees for the lots that we sell in the cemeteries, so that the people will pay for perpetual care. Then that means that we will be mowing and taking care of their lots, which we do everything. But most people will pay the perpetual care fee. And so it differs on the size of the lot, how many lots you have there.
So the income is the interest that's raised on, like, the principal is 91,000, and the income that's accrued in there.
did you say 91,000?
Under number
91,000.
2, yeah.
It's the second
Oh,
item listed
oh,
on the
oh.
first page. So the principal's 91,475,
Mhm.
and then the income is interest, it's 48,000.
Yes. So we can utilize the income if there's projects, in the cemetery to do. Capital types, we would have income of 4,710 to use, but for actual just maintenance, we can use that income.
So we had, Peter had asked about a mower.
Yeah. Mhm.
And he's using somebody else's pickup truck or something.
Yeah,
to get
his
equipment
mowers,
around.
the mowers have come through the use of the capital improvement monies, or we could use other monies as long as it fits the descriptions that we have on some of the accounts. And so we have over the years, through a resolution, authorized the use of the funds. So each time money is taken out of these reserves, there has to be a resolution voted on by the town council ahead of the project.
Okay. So I'm just wondering why we couldn't fund, like, his tractor, like he borrows a tractor when they need it.
If he asks for this, then we can do it. He's buying one this year. Yeah.
I'm just thinking
They're not
items
cheap
like that
either.
where he's kind of coming with his hat in his hand and there's clearly
He's
money.
very conservative.
Oh, I understand
Yeah.
that, but he's also, I mean, he spoke to, not having enough help and everyone's out there all these long hours and things like that and stuff, when we clearly have the ability on a yearly basis in order to be able to better fund that department and have it work better and not have him feel so overwhelmed.
We're putting together and putting in the budget that he's requested. He's just very conservative. Yeah. And he does borrow things. They've all borrowed between the departments. But yes, his tractor is going to be purchased, or mower is going to be purchased through one of the cemetery accounts. And that's actually coming up shortly. He's got bids out now. We helped him put together the RFP.
That's good.
Well, he had mentioned before about how, there's like standard size lawnmowers, but the cemetery is not laid
Mhm.
out in the way that
Correct.
you can use them. So would it behoove us to try and find some custom type of arrangement in order to be able to be more effective at doing the work? Either reduce the man hours or make it a little more ergonomical for them rather than having to weed whack so much.
Well, I think he's looked at these before, but I can ask him about that.
Okay.
Could I ask why the fire department is the only one that is in parentheses?
That's been
That
his
usually means
special.
negative.
Yeah, it's really not. It's how they've put that down. They had a number of those they did that to, and we had to go back and check out the amounts. For example, they did that to the road construction reserve.
Well, I
too.
couldn't find any other ones in here.
Oh,
Oh,
there's
that
a
says the
couple.
road construction
Yeah.
reserve.
They're
Okay, I
actually
see
not
that.
in negative.
So those are not negatives.
They are not, there's
They are
nothing that is
positives.
negative. The flower account got very close, but it was not.
What are you talking about, flower
Yeah,
account?
there's a floral trust,
Rural trust.
yeah, number 16. And there's a number 18.
Flower trust account.
Yes, these are set up to buy flowers for certain lots. They call them the flower accounts. When they got put, the monies got put in here decades ago into the reserves, which have moved from bank to bank, or the trust. They just called it floral and flower trust number 2.
And what are they for?
Purchase of flowers for certain cemetery lots, put together through their deeds. Yeah, it was set up by
Oh,
Blake.
set up through the deeds?
Yes, through the
Geez,
cemetery
I have to look at
deeds.
our deed.
This is.
Yeah, I don't
We-
think you haven't done it, but,
No, we didn't, but Dean's parents probably did. We have a large lot.
It seems like a lot of money to have in there. Are we not spending this down on a yearly basis? Like, are we not?
Do we not know how many lots we're putting flowers on?
Yeah.
Or how many we are rather putting flowers on?
Is this like a service that somebody pays for when they?
yes, that's correct.
When they
Yeah.
buy a lot?
Is
Yeah,
that
there's a
different than the
list.
perpetual care?
There's a list of where the flowers are for. The perpetual care is more for the mowing,
Okay, so
the picking up.
groundskeeping type of thing.
Yes, yes.
Doesn't that kind of go along with just buying a cemetery lot? They're not gonna.
No.
It's not like they go out there and like this one here is overgrown and that one's not.
I
And,
understand.
it all gets mowed. So.
It will all be mowed whether you have perpetual care or not. However, there is a chart in purchasing a lot that, we encourage people to get the perpetual care, and rarely is there an argument.
Well, that's kind of silly.
I know.
If you don't
It's-
get the
It's
perpetual care.
It's an old-fashioned setup. for,
I've seen
you know.
some cemeteries where there was not perpetual care.
Yes.
And so.
But it seems to be silly to make people pay more for it when we do it anyway, is what I'm saying. If everybody
We-
gets their lots mowed anyway, or just does everybody flat out
I
get
think
the
ev-
perpetual care?
I think everybody gets the perpetual care
Yeah.
when they
Why
buy
don't we
the
just
lot.
sell lots and say it's included? It's kind of redundant to do that.
No,
Yeah,
I
like,
understand. It's
you
an
don't
old-fashioned
want the care
system.
for the first 10 years, that's it.
Well, right, it's kind of redundant, and then we have, ongoing,
I've seen you for a long time.
bank accounts don't have to be
Oh, come right in.
and
Yeah.
reconciliations that need to be done, and
Okay, great.
like, why aren't these flower chests merged into one? They have the same purpose.
So we've got Ed here from TD Cemetery.
Hi.
Cemetery accounts. Why don't you introduce yourself to the councilors? There are different ones, so this is
Okay.
Ed Donahue.
Yeah, I'm an investment advisor for TD Wealth in our Portland, Maine office. Been working with the town of Pittsfield and the cemetery fund account. Gosh, when did?
2003.
Well, I know TD has. I know I've been involved since about 2012. Sounds about right. But yeah, the account's been with TD since 2003. And what I'm hoping we can do today, you said 45 minutes, right, Kathy?
Sure.
About 45
I know
minutes.
you always do such a great presentation.
I can, well, I hope you're holding judgment until the end.
You
Thank
can
you.
talk 10 minutes if you want to.
What's that?
You can talk 10 minutes if you want to.
I'm guessing it's going to fall somewhere between 10 and 45.
Thank you.
Let me grab one from you, Kathy, as well. Now, is this everybody that's going to be here today?
That would be
Okay.
correct. And
All
if you
right.
have a couple extra copies,
Oh, I do. Let me give you
will
those.
give them to people. I've got my little file here.
Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, your presentations are always so easy to understand and
I
read.
try to make them.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Again, I was looking back, and I know we've had some communication over the
Yeah.
past few
Yeah.
years, and I've offered to come up, and it just hasn't been good timing. But I think the last time I was here, I think it was the summer of 2015. It was the last time we were up and taking.
Yeah, we used to have regular meetings.
Yeah, quarterly. I think every meeting was around 5:30
Yeah,
p.m.
in the beginning we did.
Yeah. Yep. And again, as I mentioned to you in the email, Kathy, recently within the last month, I'd be happy to pick up again on whatever schedule the committee sees fit.
Yeah, excellent. So we'll be discussing the schedule we want to use and then trying to do this a little bit earlier in the day, so you're not coming up at night.
Okay, I appreciate that.
So you can talk about anything you like.
All right, great. So what I've done is, now the page numbers are at the bottom in the center of each page. Sorry for the small print. I want to look at the historical growth of the account. I went back to the big paper file we have in our office and found statements, I think, from 3 different institutions, Quicken Riley, it might have been Morgan Stanley and E-Trade. And back in 2003, it was around February of 2003, that those 3 accounts were combined into this one single account. Okay? And I'm looking at page 2, just the growth of the account. So what I was able to tally up, again, not sure of the exact value that went in, but as of the end of February 2003 on the statements that we had in our file, there's about $466,000 that came over into a new account. And then this simply will show the growth of the account, the beginning balance each year. Any contributions were really, the only contributions were that first year by my accounting. Any withdrawals from the account each year, showing you what the ending balance is, what the net increase or decrease was for each particular calendar year. And then in the final column, the cumulative increase or decrease in account value over the period of time from 2003 until, and these numbers on this page reflect activity through March 31st, 2019, or the end of the first calendar quarter. Okay? I guess, and I've tried to make it easy to follow with it being color-coded in these. I don't even tally up the years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And I noticed one is coded incorrectly, that 2011, 4612 is actually a positive. That should be in the green. So in the 17 periods we're looking at, 16 years plus the beginning of the first quarter of 2019, the accounts actually dropped in value in 3 years. The first one, 2008, the period of the Great Recession. So it dropped by a fair amount back then.
Yeah.
Again in 2015, but dropped by a smaller amount, dropped by about $17,000. And then most recently in 2018, and that was primarily due to the volatility we saw in the stock market in the fourth quarter of last year. I think everything would seem to be going well. October was bad, November recovered a little bit, and then December was terrible. I think it bottomed out on Christmas Eve Day or Friday. I think Christmas Eve Day was a Monday this past year. I remember that Friday before the market bottomed out for the year. And then Christmas Eve Day, the market was up like crazy, 600-700 points on the Dow Jones Industrial
disappointing
Average.
because we ended up at the end of the year, not as good, and in January it went way up.
Yeah. Well, as you can see, the net increase for the month, or for the quarter, for the first quarter alone, $75,000 through March 31st. That more than kind of offset the loss for last year. But one thing I'll point out is that number, that 75,000 number, or the ending balance of 943 and change, was as of March 31. The ending balance as of last Friday, and you'll see a report in here that shows the updated market value. Last Friday that I was working off of, the account's actually valued at a little over 970,000 right now. So The year-to-date increase through April 19th is a little over $102,000 year-to-date in the value of the account. Any questions on this page?
What are the withdrawals? Is that percentage fees for handling, or is that
It's
items that
scheduled
we take
withdrawals that the town had voted on to do,
Yeah,
which will likely become larger this year.
Yeah, but basically the first 3 years, those first 3 years, 2004, 5, and 6, where we see withdrawals, and those are larger than the others. In those years, I was looking through my notes, and those were a reimbursement for a George Parks and a capital improvement funds, other town funds reimbursement from this account to those. After 2006, what those withdrawals are, it's basically, there's $5,500 that comes out twice a year. I think it's June and December, Kathy, if I'm not mistaken. $5,500 that gets transferred out to, is it the town's operations account? Or yeah. So $11,000 a year in withdrawals to the town. And then the difference between the $11,000 and the numbers in each of those columns is our investment management fee that's taken out of the account. Our investment management fee is calculated on a monthly basis. Basically, it's 75 or 0.75% of the value of the assets on an annual basis. How it's calculated and taken and pulled directly from the account at the end of each month, we look at what the market value is, multiply that by 0.75%, and then take 1/12 of that, and that's what the difference is there on the withdrawals from 2007 onward. The management fees in those earlier years, 2004, 5, and 6, but there were additional transfers out in those years. So yeah, the purpose of this page was just to kind of show you the kind of the long and steady growth of the portfolio. You know, in the graph up above, if I were to superimpose a similar chart or graph with stock market performance, whether it's the Dow Jones Industrial Average or the S&P 500, you'll see the dips at the same time and the peaks at the same time, except the dips are less pronounced and the peaks are less pronounced on this graph because this portfolio, and we'll get to the asset allocation of the portfolio, unlike the stock market, which is a barometer for stocks, this portfolio only has about 65% invested in stocks, and the remainder of the portfolio invested in bonds and cash, which are much more conservative investment options. Okay.
Much more stable.
Much more stable. I like to call the fixed income or the bonds in a portfolio, it's really a cushion. Now, the reality is bonds can go up and down in value as well, just as stocks do. The difference is the kind of range between which bonds will move in value is much narrower than the range between which stocks can move in value. Okay. So the next page, I'm going to revisit this only because it's been so long and you may have never heard of this before. The next page at the top of the page, it says Asset Allocation, TD Wealth Current Position. One of the benefits of someone in my position working for a place like TD Wealth, they're not putting us out there on our own to make asset allocation decisions for clients, right? I spend way too much time doing this to be the guy that's making high-level asset allocation decisions for our client portfolios. So we have a committee. It's called our Wealth Asset Allocation Committee. And for every investment objective we manage to different investment objectives. We have some clients that are all in bonds, all fixed income, very conservative portfolios. We have very few clients who are completely in stocks, if any, but we have different objectives we manage to in between. You know, basically we have 3 investment objectives that most of our clients fall into. It's what we call a balanced income objective, which is about a 35% allocation to stocks and 65% to bonds and cash. A balanced objective, which is 50-50, and then a balanced growth objective, which is 65% stocks, 35% bonds and cash. This portfolio happens to be managed to a balanced growth objective, okay? But our Wealth Asset Allocation Committee, for long-term strategic allocation, we have an allocation that says you should have so much allocated to U.S. large cap stocks, small and mid cap stocks, international stocks, government bonds, corporate bonds, high yield bonds. And that long-term strategic allocation is really set in stone, if you will. So all else being equal, for a long-term investor, which any account like this would be, that's the target allocation, strategic target allocation. But this committee meets on a monthly basis, and they'll make adjustments to that allocation over time based on what their outlook is, whether they're looking at a global economic outlook, a domestic economic outlook. They'll look at political implications of what's going on domestically and abroad, and sensing anything that might affect or cause for change of the allocation we have of the portfolios. So this committee gets together on a monthly basis. They don't necessarily change the allocations on a monthly basis, but periodically they'll make adjustments to them. Now, it's never going to be a scenario where they say, well, if the target's 65% in stocks, and of that 65%, U.S. large cap equities is 42, we're going to drop that 42 to 10. It's never going to be a move that's that drastic. Usually they'll overweight or underweight those strategic allocations slightly. To give you an idea, I hope that makes sense. To give you an idea of where we stand currently, what our current positioning is, for each of these investment categories or asset classes, it's gonna say it's either neutral, which means if it's neutral, then the allocation that we have to those categories right now is consistent with our long-term strategic allocation. It might say modest overweight, modest underweight, or overweight, underweight, and that's just an indication of where we are right now relative to that long-term strategic model. Okay, so U.S. large caps, we're modestly overweight. U.S. small and mid-cap stocks, smaller company stocks, we're neutral. International equities, developed market international equities, Europe, Australia, Far East, we're modestly underweight right now. We think, especially with the equities in Europe at this point in time, Europe's having some growth difficulties with the different geopolitical issues that they've got going on. So we're modestly underweight international equities. Emerging market equities, however, we're modestly overweight. Now, it's worth noting here that in our long-term strategic allocation, we don't have direct exposure to emerging market equities. But we do right now. And we'll see on the following page what the allocations are to these categories. But we have emerging markets exposure right now. Gold. We sometimes will have an allocation to gold in our investment portfolios as a hedge against extreme outcomes. If we anticipate significant volatility, whether it's in interest rates or stock market, we might get a position in gold in there as a hedge against that. Again, I don't think we've ever had more than a 5% position in gold in any client portfolios, but it's a tool we have in our toolbox, if you will, should the situation warrant it. We don't have any exposure to gold right now. When I say intermediate corporates, intermediate treasuries, those are bonds. Bond types of investments. Right now, we're modestly overweight corporate bonds and underweight treasury bonds, primarily because we see that the Fed has seemed to put a halt on raising interest rates, and there's a distinct yield advantage to corporate bonds. Yeah, so you're going to make more money buying a corporate bond, or get more interest buying a corporate bond than you are buying a treasury right now. We're neutral relative to our short-term bond allocation, and we are modestly overweight in high-yield corporate bonds at this point. And we have a modest overweight position in cash. Now that cash is actually starting to pay something again. 3 years ago, you were lucky if you could get 0.2% on a savings account. Now savings accounts are paying a little bit more than that. Okay. Just to give you an idea of some recent tactical changes or the adjustments, as I mentioned, we did move to a modest overweight from neutral for emerging market valuations. They're attractive now. That particular asset class had underperformed relative to the other classes for a handful of years, and thankfully we didn't have any direct exposure to them. Because of the underperformance, the valuations of the underlying stocks became more attractive, and we've established a position in emerging market equities. It's a 3% position of the overall portfolio. The intermediate treasury bonds and the intermediate corporate bonds, we just talked about that, and basically, strategically, we'll have an equal weighting to both of those. But because of the interest rate environment that we're in, we increase the allocation of corporates while decreasing the allocation of treasuries. Okay. And the high yield bonds, again, we just moved to modest overweight from a modest underweight. Spreads widened in the second half of 2018 to a point where they're much more attractive. So decisions such as this, I kind of started my explanation of that, which is probably far too longer than it needed to be. But I started by saying it's great to work at TD in my position because we've got this committee of economists and stock portfolio managers and bond portfolio managers that are keeping their eye on this and making these decisions. And as these decisions are made, they're implemented in all of our client portfolios. Okay. So the next page, page 4, you'll see at the top of the page just the estimated annual interest and dividend income. That's a number that's fairly predictable. Now, in a portfolio like this, you've got different ways of looking at the growth in the account. You've got interest and dividends, interest that are paid on bonds or money market funds, the cash option, and dividends that are paid on stocks. And based on the current structure of the portfolio, we have a pretty good idea each year of what that will be. Okay, because bonds have a fixed coupon to them, and dividends are posted by publicly traded companies as to what the dividend rate is. So we have a pretty good idea each year what that estimated annual income is going to be. As of April 19th, when I generated the report, the estimated annual income for this portfolio is a little over $21,000. And again, that's just interest on the bonds and dividends on the stocks. What's not taken into consideration in that number is a number that we can't quantify because we don't know how the value of the underlying investments is going to change over the course of the year. But this number is fairly predictable. So that $21,000 and the current value of the account equates to a portfolio yield of 2.17%. And breaking that down even further, the stocks in the portfolio carry a dividend yield of just under 1.5%. The bonds in the portfolio, a little over 3.7%, and again, a money market fund's paying 1.75% at this point. You blend all that together with the allocation you see below, and that's the 2.17% yield on the portfolio. So the asset allocation summary at the bottom of the page, we see the April 19th market value, and you'll see at the bottom the value of the account is a little over $970,000. You see the allocation percentage. And then the last two columns are those two things I was talking about before. We've got the TD Wealth tactical allocation, which is the TD Wealth strategic allocation adjusted for current, for what we see going forward. So you can tell in looking at this where the TD Wealth strategic allocation for stocks would be 65%. Right now we're at 67%. So we're slightly overweight equities relative to fixed income on a broad basis. Even within each category, you'll notice, as I mentioned before, we have a modest overweight position in large cap stocks. We're neutral, small mid cap, and we're modestly underweight international, 10% versus 13%. And we have a modest overweight position in emerging markets, or a 3% target, and that's compared to a 0% target in the strategic allocation. And then even on the fixed income side, as I mentioned before, the split between corporate bonds and U.S. government bonds in the strategic allocation, those are even. You can see how we're overweight corporates, underweight governments. We're right on target with short term, and then high yield, we're slightly above with the neutral position would be. The actual allocation percentages track pretty closely. The large cap is under the tactical allocation by a good chunk, and cash is a little higher as well. There's a couple things leading there. The large cap performance in the fourth quarter was certainly subpar, and during 2018 was subpar, especially relative to the S&P 500, which is a good barometer for large cap stocks. And we'll get into the specifics of that in just a bit. But also, these portfolios get reallocated on a periodic basis. So it won't be too long before you see those allocations closer to the tactical allocations, but gives you an idea how a portfolio can shift and adjust over time. Any questions on this page? So starting on the next page, we've got several pages which are going to show you all the holdings in the portfolio. I don't want to go through all of them, because that'll take longer. I've already taken longer than the 10 minutes that Kathy asked for. And if we do that, we'll be way over the 45 minutes. But if we want to just kind of glance through it quickly, it can give you an idea of how this portfolio is constructed. So really, the individual holdings start on page 7. So the first 1, 2, 3, basically the first 3 full pages, those are the individual stocks held in the portfolio. And I probably should have mentioned this earlier. The portfolio is structured, the bulk of the portfolio, that if we look back at the allocation, 44%, we have a 44% target in domestic large cap stocks. The domestic large cap stocks are managed, this managed portfolio where you own the individual equities, are managed by an investment management firm called Epic Investment Partners. TD acquired Epic Investment Partners back in 2013. So they're the ones making the decisions on the individual equities that are held in the portfolio. So the first 3 pages just give you an idea of the individual stocks that are held by economic category, right? You see consumer discretionary first, consumer staples, energy, financials, and so on down the line. And you see the types of names. You'll probably recognize a lot of the companies in there. There might be some that you don't. But it gives you an idea of the stocks that are actually held in the portfolio currently. And then, and that's basically pages 7, 8, and 9. If you look at the top of page 10, where it says Other, you notice we had allocations not just to domestic large cap stocks, but we had a 10% allocation to small and mid cap stocks. We had 10% allocation to developed market international stocks. We also have a 3% allocation to emerging market equities. Well, rather than having managers buy shares of individual stocks in each of those categories, for the purposes of diversification, the ease of diversification, we use mutual funds for those categories. So each of these funds listed, the Invesco International Growth Fund and the Oakmark International Fund, the first and the last in that category, those two together come out to about 10.3%. And those are your developed market international equity funds. We have a growth version and a value version. We have the Neuberger Berman Equity Series Genesis Institutional. That's a long word, a long name for the fund, but that's our small and mid-cap fund option. And then you have your iShares Core MSCI Emerging Markets ETF, or Exchange Traded Fund. And that's self-explanatory as to what that is. That gives us our emerging markets equity exposure. I will mention that both the emerging markets holding was, when we made a recent change to move it to an overweight position, that was put in, I think it was February of this year. We didn't have any exposure to that prior, and the emerging markets fund was put in February of this year. The Neuberger Berman and the Oakmark International Fund both replaced other funds that weren't performing well. We had also a mutual fund called the Epic Small and Mid Cap Mutual Fund. Same firm that manages the large cap portfolio. The fund underperformed, so we replaced it with Neuberger Berman. And there was a Harbor International Value Fund that had also been underperforming its peers, so we replaced that with the Oakmark International Fund. And that's the other component that we have within TD, which makes my life easier. We have a product research team. There are lots of different investment options available out there. If any of you have IRAs and E-Trade accounts or Ameritrade accounts and you ever try to go into what you're going to do, a lot of options out there. We have a product research team that really narrow the list down to recommended investments, several recommended investments within each category. So we that way it makes my job a little bit easier. I know that I'm choosing from very well vetted options whenever I'm putting something in a portfolio. Okay. That next section under fixed income and fixed income funds, we have all of our exposure to fixed income or bonds, we can use those terms interchangeably, through mutual funds. Typically, if we had a portfolio where there was at least $500,000 to $1 million or more in bonds or fixed allocated bonds or fixed income, you might see individual bonds held in the account. But because the allocation to bonds is actually, it's below $300,000 in this case, again, for the purposes of diversification, we use bond funds. And each of these funds has, bond funds may hold 70 to 250 different bonds within each fund, but with similar characteristics. So we get our exposure to bonds through those funds, and then the last piece is just the cash. And the cash and cash funds, the way that lays out is very confusing to me. The cash payable, the cash receivable, I don't even know what that's getting at there. But the bottom line is, you flip to the beginning of the next page, the market value of the cash in the portfolio is just under $70,000 at this point. Okay. Any questions before I move to page 12?
I had a question about
Yeah.
some of the individual items that are in here. And I don't know if this is a conversation that's ever come up before.
Okay.
As far as socially responsible investing and divesting from petroleum-based companies and things like that. Whether there's alternatives to that, Pfizer Health. Some of these here, like
What page do you want, Helen?
Dow DuPont Chemical, Eastman Chemical.
Yep.
Companies like that. It's just in the listing of the where it
Socially
talks
irresponsible.
about
Pages 7, 8, and 9, yeah, the individual
Yeah,
equities.
7, 8, 5 years on 8. Under energy, there's 2 petroleum, Occidental Petroleum Company. 8 has Pfizer. Some health. I'm assuming those are insurance companies, United Health Group Services,
Yes.
Universal Health Services.
Yes.
DuPont Chemical and Eastman Chemical are listed on page 9. WEC Energy Group, I'm not sure what that is, but it's a utility. I don't know if that's do you have like a department that researches that, or any investments that can be made in like C Corp type things, or?
Yeah, it's a question that comes up quite a bit. Now, each manager, this Epic happens to manage, this is their large cap value portfolio. Their mandate is to find companies that generate decent free cash flow, pay the earnings back to shareholders either in the form of dividends or buying back shares of the stock. They don't have any social screens in their management of the portfolio. There are socially conscious mutual funds out there. There are socially conscious managers out there. These guys, their mandate isn't that. That said, we do have flexibility within the management of a portfolio to restrict certain holdings. So if the committee were to decide, for instance, I have a hospital in Maine that we manage a significant amount of money for. It's just a very large account, but they don't want any stocks in their portfolio that derive their primary revenues from tobacco. Now, it just so happens that the Epic manages 2 separate strategies for our clients. It's this large cap value strategy that's less focused on dividends, but then they have another strategy called their U.S. equity shareholder yield strategy that is focused on companies that pay a decent dividend but also increase that dividend year after year. Cigarette companies pay good dividends, and from a financial perspective, they're pretty strong companies, so they fit the profile for that particular strategy. And at the time that we signed on this hospital as a client, they looked at the holdings in the portfolio and they said, okay, well, we're going to have to restrict Philip Morris and Altria, or whatever. So they put restrictions on those 2, so we didn't buy it. But at that point in time, those are the only ones they saw, so they're the only ones we restricted. Obviously, there are other tobacco companies out there, and over time, the managers are managing the portfolio. They say, okay, well, we can't buy these 2. Oh, but look, there's another tobacco company that we're recommending buying, so they put it in the portfolio. And by the time,
it does well.
What's that?
And it does well.
It is kind of a funny story. So in this particular case, I was meet with them on a quarterly basis, and by the time we met, I had figured out that the tobacco stock went in, and as soon as I saw it was in there, we sold it and got out of it. right? But of course, we realized again, this is a $68 million account, so even on a small position, there's a pretty sizable gain in it. So when I went up and met with the investment committee for the hospital, I said, the bad news is a name that hadn't been restricted or hadn't been screened was added to the portfolio. A tobacco name was added to the portfolio. Once we figured out it was in there, we sold it. It was maybe 10 days later, we sold it. I said, the good news is there were realized gains of about $26,000 on that transaction.
One thing for 10 days.
10 days. Again, the larger the account, it's economies of scale, I guess. But I said, we can do two things. I can go back and make it appear that that transaction never happened. We can backdate. There's a way to do that. Or you can just take the gains and we'll go on for here. But we're fine with gains. Thank you.
Yeah, they're not going to turn out money.
But I guess my long-winded story was trying to make a point. We can screen out certain industries, companies, if that's something this committee would ever decide to do. Yes.
And I just know that those things happen. Like there's universities that have said this is how we want to invest. There's whole states, governments that have said this is how we want to invest and stuff. Divest of certain things, not to be supporting those types of things. And I don't know if that's something that's important to us, a conversation that we want to have, or do we want to just say, yeah, the cemetery fund is doing really well. We don't care where it goes as long as we're not losing principal from it.
Yeah.
So.
And again, that
sounds good to me.
That's a discussion for any committee to have. And the one thing I will say, when you're dealing with state pension programs and university endowments, and I hate to say this, but the larger the account you have, generally the more flexibility you have with stuff like that. We can certainly screen out stocks. You'd have to tell us which ones you don't want us to hold, and we can do it. But some of these strategies that these larger institutions are able to employ are probably a little more sophisticated than what we could do on a $1 million account.
And it sounds like, this is the investment account that we would have flexibility in, Catherine, versus the prior accounts that we were discussing.
Definitely.
We don't have any flexibility in discussing. So I don't know. But that being said, I don't want to be hypocritical about our investing and being socially responsible there when we're sending all of our solid waste to a landfill. So, if we're going to fix one thing, we should fix both things,
right.
And that type of thing. So, it just, as I was reading through the different things, it just kind of struck me that are there other conversations that we have that we should be having aside from the bottom line of it and that type of thing.
And again,
anything in particular that you were looking at?
Well, just the petroleum companies popped out to me as far as, and I don't know what companies, like this company, Anadarko. They could own like BP that had a huge oil spill, or they could own, somebody that wants to drill off the coast of Maine. You know what I mean?
Right.
We don't know enough about.
We don't necessarily.
We don't know enough about those companies, and then you look at things like, we own stock in Home Depot and Dollar General.
And Microsoft
we have
and Marvel
Dollar General in
Technology.
town, so we're supporting a hometown business. I guess should we put more? I don't know. I just know that that's a concern for some people. So I thought it would bring it up, and especially under the healthcare type ones with Pfizer. They're a drug company. Do they have any role in the opioid epidemic and producing those things?
Not
and,
Pfizer.
Are there things like that that we should really
not
like Dow,
Pfizer?
DuPont.
Not Pfizer. They make Viagra, so they're doing real good.
But yeah, I just, things like that if it were my personal investments, those are questions that I would ask. Is there something that could be substituted in there for that? And if that's something that's important to us,
I think
if we hear back from people,
you
then
need to look at it from, is it a council objective? How,
right. That's my question, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Personally, my retirement fund is all socially responsible. I'm willing to take the hit on, what the return may be, a little bit less than everything else, but
I'm not certain
my
at this
choice.
point in time we could choose to be that picky.
Well, there's people that, I'm sure if you go through every company in here, somebody's going to have something to say about it.
Exactly.
There are people that would say we should not be investing in Facebook Inc.
Yeah, really.
You know, there are people say we should not be investing in Apple, they have a monopoly. I mean, there's all kinds of things that you could say about things.
Well,
but
Google's smart.
I just didn't-
You have Google
ABC.
as well, you just can't
Yeah.
see it because their,
I mean, you
their
know-
actual company name for trading purposes is Alphabet Inc.
Yeah.
Alphabet.
So about
Yeah.
that.
Alphabet is,
Do we want to
is
get
it,
going?
Alphabet is Google.
And we're,
Yeah.
are we taking, are we
Yeah,
getting
do we
that?
want to be having Boeing stock
That's
right
true.
now? I just thought it was a question to ask and
Yeah.
something that we can talk
Yeah.
about to
No,
see,
it was a good
you
one.
know, what's feedback that we get from people. Maybe not like right away, but maybe next time we meet, if we have feedback from residents about things like this, that, you know, it's another conversation that we can.
Yeah, and again, I think, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
That's fine.
No, just, I think, whatever the committee decides, I can come to you with whatever, you know, whatever options we have. Again, I don't think I can be as flexible as a $3 billion state pension program or whatever the case may be, but there are certain things we can do. So whatever we can do to accommodate, you know, we'd be happy to work with you on.
Yeah, I mean, if we're looking at the pesticide issue, do we really want?
Well, that's the one that he.
Yeah.
Which
I mean,
one?
It's not Monsanto, but
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
number 2.
Yeah.
So we did discuss this a couple of times over the years, and it was informal discussion. And there were certain things that people were not interested in, of course, tobacco products. But in the end, it seems as though, at least to the councilors at that time, in an informal discussion, without doing research, that many of these would have items. So, you know, where do you start and stop?
Well, that's the other question.
Yeah.
Where do you
Right,
place
because
it?
like you said, everybody could have something to say about every company.
Sure.
Well, I will move us along to page 12 next. This quickly, we looked at the holdings per economic sector, right? Whether it's consumer discretionary, consumer staples, financials, what have you. What this page is meant to do, this is only indicative of those large cap equity holdings within the portfolio. The upper right hand, the table on the upper right hand side of the page basically represents what the graph shows at the bottom of the page. So the bars in blue are the allocations of the stocks in the portfolio that Epic is managing for you versus the bars in red, which are the weightings of the stocks within the S&P 500. So, and this will come to play in a little bit, you'll notice we're underweight the S&P 500 in consumer staples, energy, real estate, communications and utilities, and we're overweight in financials and industrials. So significantly overweight in financials and industrials. So it just gives you an idea of where, you know, and this is fluid, right? There are certain times where we're overweight sectors that we're underweight now and vice versa. But this just kind of gives you a snapshot of where we're at right now. Page 13, it's a list of the bond funds. Again, we already saw this list, but this particular report here has a credit rating of the fund. Now, credit rating from a bond, the higher the credit rating, the safer the bonds are, right?
Usually the
So
higher the yield.
yeah, and the lower the credit rating, the higher the yield typically, because who's going to buy your bond if you have a lower credit rating than a treasury? Well, you're going to buy it because you're going to get paid to buy it in the form of a higher yield. This just gives you an idea. Everything that's now it starts at AAA, AA, single A, triple B, and then double B, single B, and below. Anything triple B or above, or anything from triple A down to triple B is what's considered investment grade, or in other words, safer, right? Grades it safe, but it's considered investment grade. Anything under that triple B rating is what we consider junk bonds, or I prefer to call them high yield bonds. We would never own a high yield bond or a junk bond, an individual junk bond, in a client's portfolio. Because owning a single bond, if it's got low credit quality, the risk of default is too high. When we have a high yield fund, that high yield fund probably owns 400 different high yield bonds. So if one bond were to default, it doesn't move the needle all that much. So again, it's a hedge against that type of risk. So the high yield fund is a B rating, as we would expect it to because of what it is, but it also carries with it a yield of 5.1%.
The Metropolitan West fund, I don't like that fund as much because it's kind of a blend between corporate bonds and government bonds, more, generally more corporates than governments. But it's got a BBB rating, but it's still investment grade. You got your PIMCO investment grade corporate bond fund at an A rating, the Treasury fund obviously at a AAA rating, and then the short-term fund, it's a combination of government and corporate bonds at an A rating. But my purpose in showing you this was the overall credit rating of the bond portfolio is an A- rating, which again is pretty decent credit quality. So the next page, I'm going to try to move a little faster here. Next page is the performance overview. And now I mentioned, and this is as of March 31. Again, we know the account's up a little bit since the end of March, but what I mentioned before is the domestic large cap equities that Epic managed they underperformed in 2018 by a pretty wide margin. They also underperformed for a little bit of 2017 by a not as wide a margin. So the most recent performance has been somewhat subdued relative to benchmark indexes. But I want to show you, like for instance, the top two lines. The top line where it says Town of Pittsfield, that top line is the performance over those periods noted. And the growth income index is it's basically an index comprised of 65% S&P 500, 30% bond index, Barclays Intermediate Government Credit Bond Index, and 5% T-bills, which is a cash proxy. So it shows you the top line is the performance of the account versus the performance of a blended index. Now, the trailing 12-month numbers, right? 2.2% compared to 7.8. Bad numbers. How does that break down? You look down in the next category, equities. Equities in the portfolio over the prior 12 months, 1.8% compared to 9.5% for the S&P 500. All right, and we're going to dig a little bit deeper into that. The S&P 500 again is it's an index for large cap stocks, and it's the index that the investment policy calls for comparison to. We do have exposure to small and mid-sized stocks and international stocks as well, which different categories behave differently. Don't expect their performance to track the S&P, but we'll break that down on the next page. The fixed income over the trailing 1 year, fine. It's just about even a little ahead of it. And the cash, I'm not sure why the cash is as low as it is and why T-bills are as high as that is. But overall, the performance over the trailing 12 months has been inferior. You look at the first quarter, the last month, looks a little better, a little closer, closer to where we want to be. And then anything over the 12-month, the 3-year, the 5-year, the since inception numbers, that's not return over that period stated, it's the average annual return over that period stated. Okay, so, for instance, we look at the since inception number of 7.32%. If you go back and look at the growth of the portfolio, we went from $466,000 to $943,000, all the while with $310,000 coming out. That's more than a 7% return. But so that 7% is the average annual return.
He's using total figures.
Yeah.
What page are you on, and what are you talking about?
I'm on page 14.
Okay.
And I'm just looking at the, as I said, the 3-year, the 5-year, the since inception numbers, anything that's over a 1-year period, it's the average annual return for that period. Okay? So the next page will show you the performance of each of the stock categories, if you will. So again, if you look at the trailing 1 year, right, the domestic large cap stocks that Epic managed, 5.39%. Again, that's a fair comparison to the S&P 500 and underperformed by a wide margin. But the problem also over the past year, small and mid-cap funds were negative slightly, and international funds were down about 6%, leading to an overall equity performance of 1.88. That's what leads to that. Again, you look at the year-to-date numbers on page 15. Again, a little bit better first quarter. The large cap equities are up 13.5. The small and mid cap equities are up almost 15, and the international equities are up almost a little over 12 for overall equity return of 13.41%. So trailing year bad, it's turning the corner. I do want to address, let's see. So page 16 just shows for the first quarter of 2019, the top 5 and the bottom 5 contributors to the, again, just that large cap stock portfolio. What's that?
I said we do ongoing.
Yeah, I saw that.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, so what this page is meant to do, it shows the 5 stocks that contributed to the return for the period, or contributed, accretive, and then the bottom 5. Bottom 5 contributors or top 5 detractors, whichever way you want to look at it. And it shows you the contribution to the total return for the period. It also shows you which stocks were added to the portfolio in the first quarter and which stocks were removed from the portfolio in the first quarter.
So CVX got dropped probably because of the minus 18.6%.
Not always will the drop in value drop a stock from the portfolio. When Epic's looking at this, if they see a drop in value, but they feel the fundamentals of the company are still sound, and we'll get to that in a little bit, because sometimes you can see the stock price drop, but then fundamentally they're still sound. There must have been something else going on there for them to.
Didn't they like buy somebody? But they merged and bought somebody, or they entered into like online drug sales or something.
Yes.
They had like a big change in the last year or so that I think affected them.
CV. Oh God, I'm trying to remember. Actually, let me see. I do have some comments.
It doesn't matter.
Oh, I know. It just let me just check something really
I
quickly.
know CVS is going heavy into.
Oh, yeah. CVS purchased Aetna
Yeah.
insurance last year.
That's what it
Yeah.
was. They were
Yep.
getting into
Yep.
insurance.
And they're putting a lot of document boxes in their pharmacies.
Yep.
So.
Yep. So, we get commentary periodically as to why we're adding stocks or removing stocks from the portfolio, but there are a few management changes at CVS as well as part of that CVS Aetna merger that these folks didn't like. So,
It's like anytime there's a merger, it just throws everything off the
I know.
gear.
I know. So on the next page, page 17, I do want to address this only because I've been having this conversation with a lot of clients that use Epic Large Cap Strategy, and I don't like having this conversation because the performance has been subpar over the last year plus. They try to explain it. One thing I will say is they put out an annual letter, and in their closing paragraph of the annual letter was in essence an apology. They say we understand your frustration in the performance of the strategy over the past year. But what they tried to explain about 2018, on page 17, there were 2 major factors that contributed to the underperformance for the year. The first was the first 9 months of the year, speculative stocks that did best, right? For the first 9 months of the year, speculative growth and momentum stocks drove markets higher. And then starting in October, when the volatility, the downside volatility started to hit, we saw a dramatic rotation into defensive stocks. And it's the consecutive market leadership of these 2 particular groups, 2 areas that the portfolio is underweight. It's what detracted from results during 2018. But in the first 9 months of the year, and I'm just going to read from this because it's easier that way, but the stocks of the speculative companies performed well. A number of these companies actually saw a decline in profits during the period, but what's unusual is many of them still saw a significant increase in their stock price. So the fundamentals were bad, but the stock price still went up because they're momentum stocks, they're speculative, right? A majority of the companies held in the U.S. large cap strategy that we manage for you had reported favorable growth in profits, but despite this, a large percentage of these companies declined in price or underperformed their peers. Epic views this trend as unsustainable and believe that the portfolio is positioned to perform well going forward, as portfolio holdings are exhibiting good fundamentals and are selling at reasonable to very low valuations. So that's how they addressed that speculative growth phase. And then when we saw the downside volatility in October, Epic's view was that pullback was temporary in nature, caused by concerns over interest rates and trade. But they thought it was temporary because economic and corporate profit growth in the U.S. was still quite good. And they're right about that. We saw what's happened in the first quarter. It's been a very, very strong quarter. During this period, however, defensive stocks in the communication services sector, consumer staples, real estate, utilities, They performed well on a relative basis, and typically in this type of environment, it's the short-term investors or hedge funds or traders and momentum traders put more money into these sectors. Epic happened to be underweight all of those sectors. So, we underperformed when stuff was going up, and we did worse when stuff was going down because we didn't have we were underweight in the sectors that all the money was flowing into during that period of time. But again, they remain optimistic that the strategy is positioned to do well going forward. And I hope that the next time I'm here, I'm showing you some of that turnaround. Again, I've had this discussion way too much lately, but it was nice to get some color from Epic as to why it happened, as opposed to just indicating that it did happen. And finally, we're right on 45 minutes right now. Our market outlook, as of basically, it's not even May yet, but this is our outlook as of May. We are overweight equities and underweight fixed income. We expect interest rates to be lower for longer, since central banks around the world have kind of paused hiking interest rates at this point. Corporate credit has attractive incremental yield versus government bond. That's why we're overweight. We do anticipate protracted conflict between China and the U.S., and anytime that's out there, there's potential for volatility, driven by those trade frictions that we may see. The potential for central bank missteps and slowing global growth, but overall we do continue to favor a diversified portfolio that includes high-quality equities that have the ability to increase their earnings and dividends in a low-growth environment. And the U.S. does remain our favored equity market globally. We want an allocation of cash, small, albeit to provide stability and safety of capital, and an allocation of high-quality corporate bonds, including investment grade and high yields, to provide some income diversification and stability. That's what I've got. The one thing I will say is what I've handed out is a market perspectives, the year ahead 2019. That was put out in January. The updated market perspectives landed in my inbox about 5 minutes before I left to drive up here. So what I can do, Kathy, is tomorrow, actually I'm not in the office tomorrow, on Thursday when I'm back in the office, I can send you a PDF of that most recent market perspectives, and then maybe you can distribute that in place of the somewhat dated one that I've included in your packet today.
Yep, excellent, thank you.
Thank you for having me in today. Before I leave, are there any other questions that I can answer or entertain or try to answer?
We got a bit to mull over here.
Yep. And again, I will reiterate that while the performance has been subpar on the large cap equity component, and it's tough because that's the largest piece of the portfolio, right? That's an allocation of 40, 42, 44% of the portfolio are in those large cap stocks. But Epic's a manager that's been around for a long time. They historically, their performance has been very good relative to whatever indices they compare themselves to. This has been a downtime for them, but I'm confident, I have to be, I suppose, that they're going to turn it around. But again, the things they focus on are the things that everyone would want them to focus on, which is the fundamental stability of the companies we invest in and their ability to pay dividends and buy back shares and that sort of thing. So I'm confident, but if there's any other information you want on that, just let me know. I can try to get it out to you.
Yep, very good. So we'll decide on what type of schedule we want to have.
Okay.
And if we'd like any changes, and then let you know.
Sounds great.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. You're always so detailed.
Well, again, thank you for having me, and I'll look forward to being up here sooner than the gap between my last
Yes,
visit.
I think we came up one other time, but it was just haphazard.
Yeah, I think you're right. So Heather, it's I get to see another Donahue.
Donahue.
I know, but what's interesting
Although everybody
is
wants to spell it with an O.
just last week I signed on a new client, and his last name is Donahoe, Donohoe. So we've got all the different spellings flowing
Well, it
around
used
the
to
past
be
few
O.
weeks.
Donahue until my husband's family came over from Ireland 3 generations ago.
Okay.
So, yeah, we went this fall and we kind of backtracked a little bit of stuff. So that was interesting to see.
Yeah, the Donahue comes from my paternal grandfather's side, obviously, but his parents were both Donahues, and both the D-O-N-O, but one of them had the G-H-U, and one of them just had the H-U-B. So,
Yep. Yeah,
All
it's,
different.
there's lots, it all depends on, whoever was checking them in on how they wanted to spell it.
But the funny thing is, so many different spellings, basically one pronunciation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Donahue. Sounds like it. That should be how it's spelled every time. That's how everyone says it.
Well, this
Again,
is the right way.
that's right. I agree. I agree. I can't argue with that. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Thank you.
It's always interesting. I did also make a copy of the Portland Trust Company.
Yes, and what is that?
So that's the third one that was in your packet on your desk. That is where the Pittsfield Future Fund is.
Okay.
And so I wanted to draw your attention to page 3, which has basically all the information that we would need. So in that handout,
So
on
this is
page,
this one, the speckly one?
we want Portland Trust Company.
Portland
Oh, I
Trust.
see it underneath.
It was the third, or the one on the bottom.
No, I got two of the same.
Oh, well, we'll take one back.
I got two People's United. I'll trade you a People's United.
Yeah,
They're
this
right there.
extra is right over here.
I
Okay.
see your People's United and I read.
I was wondering why I had two of the same.
Portland
Yeah,
Trust Company.
Portland Trust.
There we go.
You're overly people.
You like people.
Overpopulated.
So very quickly on page 3, we've got an overall investment market value of $1,533,672.14, and that's in the middle of the columns under market value. There are 7 CDs with 4 maturing in 2020, which if we did use these funds to make a bond payment or a loan payment, the loan payment would be due in 2020, so that should work out fine. So the investment interest rates are 1.85 to 2.4, and of course the longer ones have a higher rate. They didn't want to put too many in the longer ones because they had thought that the rates would be going up, and they will be at some extent. And so basically, at
So
this
what is
point,
the ladder?
yeah, they're not laddered as much as they used to be. However, it was due to the interest rates. So there is some laddering, but no 2021s. And so we've got approximately $48,000 of cash now in case we do need to use monies before the CDs mature in 2020. And even if they did, they're getting better and better in terms of their, how much you can cash them out for.
Now, what do we use the future fund for? What does that
Nothing
money
yet.
go
Nothing,
to?
nothing.
Well, we've used
yeah.
some of the interest, right?
We
The last
did.
2
Yeah.
years, we used the interest to just put it into the budget.
Yeah,
For what?
Yeah. So what we've done on the Pittsfield's Future Fund, we got $1.8 million back when the Maine Purse monies were all audited. They told Maine Purse they needed to return funds to all the different towns. And so we were very fortunate to get money back. We used to call up and ask if we could use it, and we were told no. But at a certain point, the law changed, the audit happened, and then the state or Maine Purse sent us the money back. So at that point, there were many ideas on what could be done. The monies were originally to pay for the retirement cost for the employees in Maine Purse. So we set up an account for that, in which each year we get the money out of the account that's necessary for our match of the retirement fund, and that's what it's really for. So that will need to be replenished at some time, which we had discussed. We then set up a certain amount in a CD that was more flexible, which is at People's United, in which over 3 years we would allocate out, I think it was a little bit over $104,500, a similar figure to that, each year to help with the budget because we're in the tight budget years. And so the rest, the $1.5 million, was placed into with an investment company. When we put out our checking account to an RFP, we attached the $1.5 million as an investment to that, thinking that would help us get better interest rates, which it did. We had put it out separately before, and we didn't get good rates at all. And so this is actually hooked to Androscoggin Bank, and this is their investments through the Portland Trust Company through agreements. And so these funds
Okay.
are there.
Okay, back up a little. Could you tell me that last part again?
Yeah, so the Portland Trust Company is in agreement with Androscoggin Bank.
Okay.
And so they're interchangeable. This is their investment mode so that they can get a higher interest rate. And so their interest rate was so much higher than all the other banks because they actually were with a trust company with investment advisors. And so that interest rate was higher. And so, as projected with the different bonds and everything. So we went with the Portland Trust
Yep.
in Androscoggin Bank, and Androscoggin Bank interest is very good. It's an excellent arrangement, even with how the deposits are done and having the holding company and everything. So these are in investments which can be cashed out if necessary. You try not to do that. And so we should have another meeting to talk about how we're going to do, if we want to proceed forward with our capital budget, which I think you do, and how this will all work.
So on this investment, the interest
Yes.
earned is 33,165.
As of now.
Yeah,
As of
that's
now.
the value as of now. There's actually interest or monies that we can use in the first account, which is the one at the top, which is $48,083.74.
That's basically a cash account, correct?
Yes, so we can use.
But that's the market value.
Yeah, market value is
Yeah.
at the bottom, yes. Yeah, the market value.
So the,
So what else does this fund get used for?
We've not
That-
decided yet.
That's what we will decide and make recommendations to the council.
so back when we were doing the budgeting and in January, when the whole paving thing came up, we said, I believe it was a consensus that we either wanted to take out a loan, because we obviously didn't add it into the budget, that we were gonna either take a loan out through the municipal bond bank to do some paving or the road projects, or take a loan out and use this to pay back the
Yes.
principles on that, and you were gonna come up with some scenarios to present to us. Will you have those for the next
Yes,
meeting?
we need to have a meeting dedicated just to this.
Right, so I was thinking that's kind of like the next thing on our plate,
Yes,
to
it would
do
be.
that.
Yeah, yeah, this is a good time. I did get an initial paving list from Highway, so we'll go.
And what
over
about Scott? Sewer and,
that. Yeah, we can talk about if there's items to do there too.
About what?
well,
Sewer, water sewer.
Yeah, he's talking about Scott and needs for.
well,
sewer.
you were talking about paving, and at one of the council meetings,
Yeah.
you said they were gonna get together and come up with a plan so that we weren't digging up a
Paving
road
them
we
and then
just
digging them
paved.
up.
We're not gonna do that.
Well, you
So
can start
do-
with all the country roads, cause there's no sewer
no
and water
sewer
lines
out
out
there.
there.
Yeah.
Only a little bit of water.
Dean said there are the
Feel free to
coal
start on
patch
it.
too,
Same
Yeah, it's
sewer.
ridiculous on the coal
and
patch. Yes.
the roads are horrendous.
We're happy that,
They are really bad, and
Happy to be
it's
tried.
just an amazing that the coal patch, the whole inventory is gone across the state.
He said you wouldn't believe it,
I know.
the amount of holes there are.
Yeah, the
He
state-
said they're not little holes
No.
anymore,
Somerset,
they're
this goes
big
right-
holes.
They're sinkholes.
Waterville is using sand.
It's horrible.
I know, because there's no patch left.
Another question.
I asked Dean about what would be the feasibility of using reclaim. And he thought it would do the same thing as sand. I'm not quite that sure.
It's probably a little bit better, but at this point, there needs to be some rebuilding on some of these. All right, so that is a big discussion item. So, yes, so we should. think
Paving or the future fund?
Both, because
Yeah,
they're
they
connected.
kind of go
They
together.
gotta
Are
go
we-
together.
So is that kind of the consensus, is that the future fund money is gonna be part of the capital budget for paving?
I think it's gonna have to be if we're gonna do any, major. We do have some money for paving, but from the last discussions, but
Right.
it's hardly enough to do anything.
Right, because it's some ridiculous amount of money per mile
It is.
to do paving.
It is.
So,
I know.
Steve told me what it was, but I can't remember.
It is ridiculous.
so in the interest of, I mean, I know you said you had to go through and reconcile all these accounts every month, and there's like umpteen million of them. Is there a way that we can combine some of these accounts, like the floral trust and the flower trust account too. They both have the same purpose.
We wanted to, but there were some documents on those, and Blake had told me they needed to stay separate.
These are the
Who
funds
told
that
you
we
that?
can't, we don't have a lot of leeway with.
In
Correct.
terms of investments, yes, and some in terms of how they were set up. From historical information from Blake,
Who's Blake?
and Blake Bartlett, who was in charge of the cemeteries for over 40 years.
Yeah.
I think we should get a legal opinion on what they can be used for and stuff. You know, whether we can combine them.
Yeah, I've got source documents from Blake. We may be able to. Yeah, there's a couple of those that I think that you can delete. But we can only delete the reserves when the projects are completed, and there's a one minor one if a project is.
So what is
Say
this,
that again?
Yeah, under the state law, the reserves stay in effect until the project is determined to be completed. So for example, for road construction monies, you would probably always keep that reserve. But there's a couple there that you could look at.
Well, like the fire department.
You would always have that, because you'd need to have some money there in case something happens that you can't absorb in the budget.
And why is that number in parentheses?
That's because of how they've bought a bond, which they're not in the negative.
Didn't do very well.
No, it's how they charged it to the accounts.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll speak with them. I've spoken with them before, and they've changed those out. There are no negatives.
There are no negatives,
There's
you
no
said.
negatives.
Okay, thank you.
It's how they charge a bond when they purchase it, based upon the amount
Yes,
of
but
monies.
according to accounting principles,
Yeah, I
when
know.
you see a parenthesis, it usually means negative.
Yeah, but it isn't. It's fine.
So what is the George Parks income?
George Parks is a
What page are you on?
section of the cemetery is dedicated to parks.
Oh.
And so those are funds that would be utilized for that area.
It's a
And why
section of
why
the
it's
cemetery?
separate, it was set up separately, decades ago.
So it actually appears that the principal is in the negative, but there's income from it.
Yeah, it's not in the negative. It's
Okay.
how they
That's what I was
So,
just
but
saying
the
about the
actual-
fire department.
The total income from it is only $194.
Mhm.
So if this is supposed to be used for a particular area
Yes, in the cemetery.
of the cemetery.
Particular family.
In the
When
cemetery?
needed, correct?
The George Parks income is for the cemetery.
Yep.
So
It's been
why
se-
didn't they buy perpetual care? You know, I mean, why do we have a separate account for this?
It was required to have a separate account. I had a town that had 43 of these separate accounts. It was a nightmare to reconcile, but you had to do it. It was how the town originally set them up and didn't want to go to court to, put them all together. They were set up as separate accounts.
So,
And the only way to change that is through the court system.
Yes.
and
I don't
this,
think we want to do
the
that.
purpose of this is to maintain that section of the cemetery?
Yes. Which we would do anyway.
And, correct, and so do we charge a certain amount of hours of the sexton and the mowers and the flowers and everything else
To
to
that
this
account?
each year in order to draw that down and get rid, once it's zeroed out, that's it, right?
Well, we can't zero out the principal.
And you have to leave the
So it's
principal
there
in.
in, so
The
it's there
state,
forever.
that's a state
The
requirement
principals
that you
are
leave
like-
the principal.
Principal for these accounts are like a dead body, they stay there forever.
Yes,
Yeah.
basically, yeah.
Once they're there, they're there.
So
They're
how
planted.
difficult is it to file court papers to have it dissolved and put into the cemetery fund? Or the cemetery flower thing?
Yeah,
And
they're
what is the
smaller ones.
cost?
Yeah, they're smaller
doing
items,
that?
so if we had 50 of these, like my other town had, I could see the town proceeding forward, but,
Mhm.
you can charge things out, we have charged things out to these.
Yeah.
We can charge it to the total, and based upon how much money's available.
You got capital improvement for cemetery, and you also got a cemetery mower
Yes.
account.
Mhm.
That seems redundant too.
It is.
Especially if the cemetery mower can be purchased with the cemetery funds.
Different fund.
Yeah, different funds.
So you could just take those accounts and add them together, and that's what we
That's what you
have.
have for
That's what you
cemetery
have for
capital.
income from cemeteries.
Yes.
So the municipal parking lot has a principal of $48,000, income of $2,982.
Is that the
So-
municipal parking lot across the street?
It's all the parking lots.
Okay.
So this is a fund that's used for like striping.
It's a fund that's been used for digging up sections of the parking lot and also paving, which we utilized for 3 parking lots. And we're gonna need the rest of the money to work on other places.
And we can never touch the principal of that.
For the reserve accounts, you can, but for all the trust accounts, you cannot.
And so why does the parking lots require a
So-
separate fund than just public works and having it be a project that they do in a particular year?
Because there were the opinion of the council at that time. Some people felt the parking lots were important, others felt the highways were important, so they were set up as separate accounts, and there were votes taken.
Now,
It
they
was
were like,
decided-
they've been like this for, when I was on the council the first time.
So it was decided to set up the parking lots separately. It's different years, people have different thoughts on what the reserve account should be.
So
How much
if
money-
there's a
Okay,
project.
so you said you can't
keep it
use the
right.
principal of a reserve account. What's the other kind of account that's in this report?
Yeah, so the reserve accounts, you can use the principal, but it's the trust accounts that you can't.
So how do we know which is which?
So because of their accounting software, everything is set up this way. So there's a principal and an interest. For reserve accounts, we can use them up to 0, because that's for the purpose, it's for a specific purpose. But the trust accounts that are scattered through here, you can only use the interest and income.
So
not
how do
the
we know
principal.
which is a reserve account and which is
Yeah,
trust account?
I can mark them up for you for the next meeting, or even before then.
Yeah.
I think we
think it'd
need
be
to
useful.
make that distinction
Yeah, I have
so we can
a,
better decide what we want to do.
yeah, I have a reconciliation account where I've separated them all out. I could just give you a copy of that. But they're set up in here, so to try to move the numbers around, like for example, before they've set up, when we sent the money, we said to put it in X reserve, and then it shows up in its own little reserve, but then to change it around seems very difficult, so we just left it there. There's 2 of those out of the total.
So there's PITT 42, the fire station reserve. Is that funds to work on the fire station
Correct.
specifically?
Yes.
So like the pointing and the concrete repair and those things that we put into the
And the
budget this
removing
year
of,
could have come out of the reserve for that?
A small amount. There's other items that need to be done inside the fire station.
So
yeah.
these funds
Yes.
here,
They're still lead paint.
are they already allocated by a prior resolution as to what they're gonna be for?
For some of them, yes, and some of them, no. Most of the road ones are.
Well, I'm just asking about the fire station
The
one.
fire station was general, so it doesn't have a specific,
But the fire station inside
it
has
has work
lead
that needs
paint,
to, work that
I
needs.
which
know.
needs to be removed.
Yeah, I realize that there's work that needs to be done with it. I'm just saying that when we were going through the budgeting process and everything, that's one point that never was brought up as far as work that needs to be done on the building. But the pointing on the concrete repair around the doors and the pointing on the brick and sealing of the brick, that was like a specific item that was brought up
It was a
for the
specific,
building.
yeah, it was a
So,
specific item because we went around.
That went,
Looked at the exterior of the buildings. The interior of the building is under the jurisdiction of the fire chief. And so there are projects that need to be completed.
so if we have money, he has money in here to do that project then? Or does he have pricing on it and stuff?
So Public Works priced out the exterior of the building. The interior of the building are items that need to be completed by the fire department.
Like?
And so, yeah, it was, I think there's painting, there's some wiring, there's a list of things that they had identified.
And the chief's aware
that the
there's
fire
money-
department has to pay for?
But there's a fire
We
department.
put the money
reserve,
away
too.
over the years to
Yeah.
build up so they could, remodel the inside of the fire station.
Of the station.
I mean, it
Okay.
needs some work. It's-
Okay.
You got a whole section of it, and you got the fire department.
So it was thought that the fire
Right.
station monies would be for the interior. They could use it for the exterior if you wanted to, but there's really
But the
work.
municipal, it's part of the municipal building, so,
It was done to make each of the, make the departments responsible.
A lot of redundancy.
Yeah.
Okay, so is the fire chief aware that he has money in his fire department reserve and his fire station reserve that he can use to do projects that need to be done in the building?
Yes, because he receives a list of what he has.
where's the fire station
First
reserve?
page, third item down on the first page.
On the first page?
Yep,
There's a fire department reserve there.
That's a fire department, where's the fire station?
page
42. Number
4,
42.
number 42.
So fire station was set up so that we would start concentrating, building up the money to concentrate on fixing the interior of the fire station. If we wanted to use some of it toward the exterior, we could, but the intent was, the interior of the fire station is dank and
Yeah,
there's some
the
items. that should
interior
be
does
addressed.
need to be done.
So if there's money in there, then all he has to do is get quotes. Does he have to put
Yeah, we would
RFPs
get,
together?
we would
or-
get quotes, and then any monies to come out of the reserve accounts requires the department head supervisor or myself to come into the town council or submit it on the agenda form.
Okay.
Because the council needs to approve monies coming out of the reserve account.
And the fire department reserve, is
Yeah.
that a different, it's a
For-
different pot of money because it's in a different reserve account. Is that designated for like equipment?
It's set up for equipment needs. If there's problems with the vehicles, let's say you could easily
Repairs.
have a $10,000 bill on a fire truck.
Yeah, if something happens and you have to have it repaired, that's really very expensive.
Yeah.
Or if the fire truck, one of them went, we may have enough for, part of a payment, or large
Right.
part of a payment if we had to do that.
We've been pretty lucky on getting
Parts.
trucks,
Yeah, and trucks.
because Dean and Bernard have been very, have spent a lot of time researching and
Yes.
looking.
They're very particular,
Yeah.
which is good. with
But,
fire
and
trucks.
the last one we got was a used one, but it's like brand new.
Yeah,
I
that's a
don't
good
think it
thought.
was even used by the
Yeah.
fire department that ordered
So
it.
you all can look these over. I can write up a description of how they all started up on the ones that I know about. And then there were a number that were here, well, many of them were here before I came, but it's pretty clear what they're for.
So unless it says reserve, it's considered a trust account and we can't use the principal.
I'm going to give you my reconciliation chart so you can see exactly what's trust and what's reserve.
Okay.
Okay.
It'll be
Because
easy.
Because if we know the reserve amounts for the different departments, if we can get that together before we look at budgeting.
Well, there's one here that says sidewalk repairs. It doesn't say reserve, but I'm pretty sure it's
It
not a
is.
trust account.
Yeah.
Yes, correct.
But there's $25,000 in there total.
Which may need to go toward the Main Street project, depending on, the quotes and bids and what comes in, or could be utilized for another piece of sidewalk. Steve Vance has looked at 3 areas where he would like to rebuild the sidewalk, so, that's a project.
Well, there's sidewalks on the side of the building that are
Yeah.
crumbling and
Oh,
falling
yes.
apart. In fact, Donnie took a tumble off one the other night, he
Yeah,
said. So,
you can
so
stick your
there's
foot
stuff
through
like
it.
that that's pretty minor projects that would go a long way to improving
Mhm.
the safety of that section at least.
Yep, the sidewalk by Biddles has been talked about for 3 years. That
In the
actually-
front or the back,
The back.
That along the side of the building here,
right?
this side and the other side, there's rebar showing and it's not, the curbing's not painted. It should have the bright yellow paint on it. And
So if
So
we're going
there's-
to be putting out a lot of paving, we would stick the sidewalks with it, because when you do the sidewalks
Yeah.
separate, you get very poor pricing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not talking about replacing the whole sidewalk. I'm just talking about
It's
repairing,
those sections, yeah.
just repairing the curbing. The sidewalk seems, well, there might be a little couple
Oh,
wonky
there's some
spots, but
problems with it.
It's
it's the
lifted,
curbing that's
right?
falling.
Yeah, there's,
if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
that
it's-
section has lifted.
yes.
So
there's,
you would have it paved instead of putting concrete back in there.
yeah, that's what Steve's thought was. There's electrical wires under, there's some issues, there's a lot of stuff under there.
So taking out the concrete and putting pavement instead.
That is what the thought was, yes.
That would look horrible,
All right, well,
horrible.
it'll need to be discussed, but if we're going to put out a lot of paving, we should stick some sidewalks in there too. You get a better
Okay,
price.
how about a sidewalk on the other end of School Street? Not my end, but the end that comes out on Heartland Avenue. That sidewalk is horrid.
I know, that's really gone downhill.
On our end, it's not much better, but on our end, we all take care of our
I know.
yards
It's
and the
as though
street and
we could spend $400,000 on sidewalks alone. Yeah.
the, but that's really bad, and it's, kids walking to school, so that should be a higher priority.
We may want to add that one in. So this is quite a big discussion topic. Basically, the cemetery capital improvement, the cemetery perpetual care, those are trusts. The 2 floral trusts are trusts. So I think that might be it, and I have a sheet set up that makes it easy to see
Good.
exactly what goes with what.
Because this is,
Yeah, there's
This
another
is a
one.
lot of
George
information.
Parks. George Parks is separate.
Yes.
But this is the software that they have. So even though the reserves do not have an income and a principal, they're just put in there. That's why it doesn't matter if there's a negative or not, as long as the total has.
so the next meeting should be what? Talking about the future fund or talking
Future
about
fund
this?
And the capital items.
Okay, and then this would be a different meeting.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Because it's sort of a side issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Catherine, where does the Manson Park Fund fall? That's not in here, it's not.
Yeah,
a town
Manson
account?
Park is not in here. It has never been in our financials, and I asked about that when I got here. I was told this was by the auditor then, because it's set up under a trust agreement. So the Manson Park Trust is managed separately by the trustees, who are also Parks and Recreation people. It's not on our financials.
So the town. I'm
It,
so
it
confused
was
about
set
that.
up
The
that way
town
because
owns
of
The
the
will.
will.
Yep, the will.
I had to do extensive research on that
Yeah.
when I did the
What's it in?
festival.
What's in it?
Mhm. All right, very good. So if we don't have any other questions, I'll contact you for another meeting, but I think in a couple of weeks, get it done for the next council meeting, so we can report in on quite a bit. In that one, we probably 2 hours, 2.5 hours. I know we don't want to go to the long meetings, which I agree to.
Is
No.
3 o'clock in the afternoon good for everybody?
I'm fine with it most days.
Most
I am.
days I'm fine.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I'm usually up by then.
So
You're
our next-
usually up by then.
So our next council meeting's on the 7th of May.
Yeah, so we'll want to do this beforehand. So I'll send you out some dates.
Next week.
Well, can't we just look at dates now?
Only
You
another
can
week.
look at dates now if you want to, if everybody has their book.
That's next week then, we have to
Yeah,
meet next week.
that's be next week.
Because we have a week, 2 weeks from today. Because the next meeting, council meeting.
Yeah.
All right, so it's the 7th, so we could have a meeting, the 1st has the recycling committee meeting. People be available on the 2nd, Thursday?
Mm.
If not, that's okay.
What time?
I'm indisposed from 2:30 to 4 o'clock.
That's okay. Friday, the 3rd.
Fridays are not ideal, but I can work with it.
Okay, well, we can look at another day. We could look at even May 6th, Monday.
That's fine.
Yeah, May 6th, Monday, does that work? Maybe start at
Heather?
2:30 if you could do it, if not, 3 is fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Good for
Okay.
me.
Okay, 2:30 on May 6th. All right, well, thank you, that was a very good meeting, it's nice to get updated on everything.
Well,
Even for
certainly,
those of- even for those
certainly
of us that deal
opened
with
my
that.
eyes a bit.
Yeah, all right, very good, thank you all. You're
Thank
you're
you.
adjourning.
Thank you for enlarging those sheets
Oh,
from
yes, those
oh my
little-
God, the
I
ones
felt
from
so
people.
bad.
I had a magnifying, I wear glasses and I still needed a magnifying glass to read it.
Oh, I felt so bad if somebody tried to read those off the
I
internet.
gave up, I just looked at TDs.
All right, so we're adjourning at 5:20. All right, well, we'll get it cleaned up here, everything up here.
Okay, do you have trash or a recycle bin?
The recycle bin evidently went with the recycling, so I have scrap paper here, and we'll take it upstairs if you'd like.
Because if it's, well, wait a minute, if this is single-sided, I'll take this home and put it in my, because I have it cut up in
Yeah,
pads.
use that.
I'll take that, never mind.
Good number three, sir. Okay, you
I saw something out there,
You never know what the stocks and the bonds will be. The stocks change constantly.
No, but I was a little disappointed that that company, or that TD acquired, that
Yeah.
did the investing,
Wow. he
didn't
did-
do a very good job.
No, they didn't, because things used to be much better. But
Yeah.
then again, it went way up again, so
Well-
they've done an astronomical